Chapter 11. Eloise bit back a smile as she served dinner. The game was working better than she had hoped. Anticipation for her evening experiment of freedom vibrated within her. She felt both shy and daring with Zeke. She didn't have room to worry about her past. The dress helped firmly make up her mind. Tonight she would be free. Even if just for pretend, let it be a game. Free of the guilt of being unfaithful to Philip. Free of the chains to the cemetery. Free to smile and dance. Free to be and feel alive in a way she had not in years. Even for one night, she would not be held back by death or fear. Zeke was oblivious to her extra attentions. His initial reaction when she came down the stairs was strong enough to ensure that he did, indeed, notice her, but he directed most of his conversation to her brother. Throughout dinner, Zeke threw questions at Tobias about everything from the business to town history and politics. He was insatiable with his questions. She was surprised at how interested he was in anything Tobias said. Though Tobias shamelessly directed many of them to Eloise, Zeke rarely looked at her and developed an odd quirk of nodding his head with a vague smile to her answers, and then began again.
So tell me, boss.
The one thing that caught his interest in her was the food. He praised the meal and asked about her recipe for the bread. Embarrassed, she confessed to buying it from Anderson's bakery. He laughed easily.
I wouldn't go through the trouble either. This is amazing.
In some ways, it was better he sent so much energy to Tobias. It gave her room to enjoy the evening without pressure. This week had dealt her such a rush of emotions, from the nightmares returning and then meeting Zeke, Simon's insults, Jessica's encouraging her to open up, Roy's interest in Jessica, and weaved through it all were constant reminders of Ezekiel James. She didn't know what to do about it all. Consistent with her cautious nature, it was foolish to think about him as more than a stranger. The feelings she had would amount to nothing because there was nothing to feel. She didn't feel anything for him. Nope, and because he was only passing through, it made him a fantasy, a safe daydream. He had no prior knowledge of Philip or her. She could be whoever she wanted to be. And that was enough to crack open a wall of her cell, which allowed a ray of sunshine to blaze inside. Once the meal was over, Zeke pushed around a few stray rosemary needles with his fork. Eloise stacked the other plates, and Tobias wiped clean Luke's hands and face.
Elle, I'm going to put him to bed,
Tobias said.
I'll be down soon, if you'll excuse me.
He manually waved Luke's hand at Zeke.
Say good night, Luke.
Eloise followed him to the base of the stairs, cupped Luke's face in her hands, and kissed his forehead. Good night, baby. See you tomorrow. Tobias leaned in as if to kiss her on the cheek, but instead leaned into her ear and whispered,
Be nice.
She glanced at Zeke before whispering back, I'm always nice. Tobias's eyebrows shot up.
Always? Always like Luke always sleeps through the night? Come on, I mean it. I think he needs a friend.
What's that got to do with me? Besides, he doesn't want to talk to me. He appears wholly uninterested in speaking to me today. Tobias chuckled.
Trust me, he's very interested. Zeke found a smudge on the table to pick at while trying not to appear interested in whatever Tobias was whispering to his wife. He had never witnessed a couple quite like them before. He couldn't nail down what it was, but something was off. Eloise, gorgeously beautiful Eloise, was happier tonight than he'd ever seen her. Granted, he'd known her for less than a week, but he felt he'd known her much longer. Her eyes shone, and with no ugly bonnet to hide her face, he did his best to keep his attention from constantly staring at her. He felt her eyes constantly burning into him, and feared any minute the truth of their meeting would be made known. Sitting across the table from her husband was unnerving. He was paranoid that he would give something away. Therefore, he'd chatted incessantly. Lord, help me. Hearing a gasp from Eloise, he looked up in time to see her slap Tobias on the arm. Her cheeks were a rose pink, and Tobias laughed aloud before disappearing with the boy upstairs. Eloise returned to the table and gathered the remaining dishes.
Excuse us, Tobias just remembered a funny story.
Oh, yeah? What about?
Oh, silly toddler things. Honestly, it wouldn't interest you.
She bustled around the kitchen, not stopping her flow of words.
How was your first week? I know the pit isn't very exciting, especially after all your adventuring. You must be used to much more entertainment than swinging a mattock.
She tied an apron around her slim waist and loaded the dishpan.
I'm always telling him he ought to do something, switch the rotation or allow for more breaks. Some of those jobs are incredibly monotonous. I don't know how a body could continue in it day after day. I know I never would. But he has an answer for everything, as always. If I'm lucky, he'll give me an answer, that is. If he doesn't have a smart remark, he'll pretend he didn't hear me. You know how men can be.
He watched her dress swish around her ankles as she turned this way and that. She'd paused by the stove to look at him pointedly, as if he were the one to answer for all men on why they were the way they were. When she braced herself to lift the large pot of heated water from the stove, his resolve to keep his distance was forgotten. He jumped to help her. "Let me." Carefully, he lifted the stock pot and began pouring it over the pan of dishes. "So, you were saying about men. How is it again? How men can be?"
You know, having a woman tell you what to do, even if it is, obviously, superior to what you were planning to do.
Obviously.
Would drive you to do the stupidest thing you could have done.
She stood too near him, watching the water pour slowly over the dishes. It was difficult to focus on the task with the feel of her dress touching his calves. He prayed Tobias didn't return in the next minute. "I've heard of this condition before, but in my observation it inflicts only married men." He stepped back from her, and she moved into his place to dunk the rag in the hot water. Setting the empty pan on the stove, he found a towel and waited to wipe them. "Usually the woman, having all the better ideas, has a snarly, contorted face from years of scowling at a man for not listening to her."
What kind of face?
Eloise passed him a dripping plate and waited expectantly. "Like this." He stopped drying for a second, squished one side of his face, and grimaced, looking altogether ridiculous. Whatever the means, the result was worth it. Eloise burst into laughter, and he couldn't stop himself. He twisted his face again. "Or this." She flicked water into his face.
Nobody looks like that. You ought to see yourself.
"Should I? And if you're going to be splashing, I need a shield. These are my only dancing clothes. Where can I get one of those fancy aprons?" She tossed him a pale blue one that was dotted with pink flowers and ruffles along the edge. After a one-handed catch, he held it up for inspection. "Oh, this color is my favorite. It brings out my eyes, don't you think?" He knew it did nothing for his eyes. They were green. Hers, on the other hand, were a different matter, as he found himself only inches from them when he looked up from the apron he was inspecting. The air hitched in his throat at her nearness. For a moment he lost track of his thoughts as she studied him. The lace around her neckline clearly accented her figure. Not that he noticed much. Her blue eyes were all the brighter against her flushed cheeks. His eyes flicked to her lips, and he wondered if she had any idea what she did to him, and how quickly she'd slap you if she knew. Her lips, that he wasn't watching, turned up at the corners.
I think green is more your color.
She spoke lithely and returned to the sink. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Dear Jesus, help me. Where was Tobias? How long did it take to put a toddler to sleep? He stepped away from her and tied the apron around his waist. Attempting to fill the silence, a tumble of words poured out. Does Boss always do the bedtime? I don't have much experience with little kids. I just always assumed bedtime was a mama thing. When he looked up, she was staring at him oddly. Land's sakes, her intense glare and pursed lips were not helping him to avoid looking at her mouth. Get to work. Come on now, you're falling behind. You still have a pile of dishes in your pan. Hustle, Chipmunk. Eloise. Or maybe he should go back to calling her Mrs. Davidson. That would keep him in line.
I'm hustling.
With exaggerated finesse, she washed another plate. Zeke stood ready at attention with his towel. He wiped each plate dry, setting it neatly onto the counter, and turned to await the next item. They worked in rhythm until the dishpan was left only with the dirty water. They tossed light banter between them, but Zeke carefully kept his distance. Rubbing shoulders with her bare arm would not be prudent, not in his current condition. It shouldn't be this hard to get a hold of himself, but he kept picturing the last time he had seen her bare arm, with white muslin undergarments clinging to her. "Knock it off, Zeke!" The night was turning into more than a simple dinner and conversation, and he needed to get out. Soon they were finished, and she ran the rag across the counter.
"Thank you,"
she said.
"I could get used to having an apprentice. Maybe you should come for dinner more often."
Heavens, no. If she only knew his mind. Zeke offered a smile nonetheless. "I would like that, but I couldn't. Mrs. Palmer serves wonderful meals, and the boss might have something to say if I showed up here like a beggar. He might wonder why he's paying me."
"He's paying you to swing a stick all day. He is in charge of making bricks. I am in charge of everything else. At least that's what I tell myself."
Eloise wiped the table, and Zeke followed behind to dry the wood with his towel. She hung the rag on a peg and removed her apron. Looking around for something else to keep his hands busy, Zeke asked, "Broom?"
"It's behind the door in the lean-to."
She nodded toward the back door as she busied herself with loading the dried dishes into the cupboard. He paused while opening the door. Her back was to him as she lifted the plates to the shelf. This woman. She was so easy to be with, to talk to, when he didn't have his stomach stuck in his throat in the presence of her husband. He ought to leave now before he got into trouble. Nothing good would come of this. Better to set his mind on something safe, like the West and the ocean, and how he was going to get there. He found the broom, but hanging on a nail next to it was a black apron. It was all black, with black ruffles along the bottom and black lace accents decorating the middle. Smiling, Zeke took it inside with him. "Hey, you're pretty funny dressing me up in flowers when you had this extra all along. The ruffles and lace are still there, but a man could—" He stopped as soon as he saw her stricken face. She stood frozen until one hand fluttered to cover her mouth. Gently removing the apron from his hand, her hands shook, and her cheeks lost their rosy tint.
"This one is mine. I don't wear it anymore. Sort of, personal."
A gentle knock sounded on the front door before it opened.
"Hello?"
Zeke backed away from Eloise. He'd been caught standing too near again. He moved to the other side of the kitchen, folded his towel, and set it to the side, waiting for Eloise to compose herself. He wondered if he should greet the guest. She ran a hand across her face and tossed the apron on the table, seemingly forgotten. Skipping into the front room, she cried out,
"Agnes!"
Agnes and Eloise exchanged hugs, and a hushed conversation began between them with quick glances in his direction. He was either the topic of discussion or meant to be kept from it. Both options rankled him. What am I even still doing here? If only he had left before Tobias retreated upstairs. He came forward. How do you do, ma'am? Pleasure seeing you again. That promptly shut down the women's chat. Bright smiles flashed between the women like a whitewashed facade. Good grief, maybe he should leave and go on alone. Agnes almost read his mind.
I'm here now. You kids can run along. And you.
She took both of Eloise's hands in her own and held her back to admire her.
Honey, how long it's been since I've seen you dressed up. It suits you beautifully. You will have a grand time.
She pulled Eloise in for a long hug. As she released her, both of the women's eyes glistened. Women were so odd. Zeke could feel that edge of reservation in Eloise again, but her response made as much sense to him as a pig in a prairie.
I will be fine. I can manage to put it aside for this evening at least. It'll be a practice run. One of many, let's hope. Honestly, I could never make it through without friends like you. That reminds me,
Agnes said.
I brought a tea ring for your breakfast tomorrow. Baked it fresh this afternoon. My gift.
Zeke had never heard of a tea ring. It was baked and edible. That much was enough to interest him.
Oh, lovely,
Eloise said.
How you spoil me. If it weren't for you and Helen, my boys wouldn't ever get bread.
Agnes pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from her basket and walked into the kitchen to put it on the table. How Zeke wished to unwrap it himself to determine what a tea ring was. He would just have to order one the next time he ate at her bakery. Agnes settled on the sofa after removing her coat and gloves. She dug through a basket of sewing things she'd brought with her. Looking up, she clicked her tongue to see them still standing there.
Do I need to say it again? You can go on and play. Luke will be fine. Tobias will be down soon,
Eloise said.
We'll all walk together.
Together, Zeke smirked. If only. He tried not to squirm when Agnes paused and looked between the two of them.
Very well,
she said. She tilted her head as if she truly noticed Zeke for the first time.
You know, dear, I've never seen a man so confident in that apron. Those pink flowers really bring out your eyes.
She winked at him before making herself comfortable. That's when he noticed the broom, still in his hand.